Hey, I'm live. All right. Good, good. Okay, well, we'll start with introductions, I suppose. My name's Jason Holman. I'm a pastor. I've been pastoring for 25 years at the same church. And I'm living in a little town in Nova Scotia, which means I pastor a little church. And fortunately, they love Jesus and they put up with me. Today, we're going to look at some what am I doing here? I've got this book called Pocket Positives. We're going to go through some of it. It's a book full of positive quotations. We're going to go through them and talk about some of them. And then I also have this book called God's Book of Proverbs. It's basically all of the Proverbs split up into topics, which is really handy. But anyhow, I'm going to, since nobody else is here and I'm talking to myself, what I'm going to do is read a quotation here, and then I'm going to practice talking about whether I agree or disagree with that quotation or any thoughts I happen to have about it. So let's start with this one. It's an anonymous quotation, and it says, "When you can do the common things of life in an uncommon way, you will command the attention of the world." When you can do the common things of life in an uncommon way, you will command the attention of the world. I think he's right. Our ability has a fair bit to do with the attention that we are able to get and the people that are willing to follow us. And so I think it's a good quotation. Let's move on to the next one. It's still about ability. It says this: "God does not ask about your ability; He asks about your availability." Again, an anonymous quotation, but a quotation that's correct. Here, this idea of God not choosing us because we have all of these great abilities that we can give Him or supply to Him, but the idea then of God does not equip us because we are wonderful, but He equips us because He chooses us. Good thought. Let's switch over to the topic of abundance. This is a quotation from a man by the name of Henry Miller, an American author. It says this: "Life is constantly providing us with new funds, new resources, even when we are reduced to immobility. In life's ledger, there is no such thing as frozen assets." It's somewhat of a convoluted way to say it, isn't it? I like the last part he says here. He says, "In life's ledger, there is no such thing as frozen assets," and I think that makes good sense. But I am wondering about whether that. I guess my problem is this: the idea of there aren't any frozen assets in life does strike a chord with me, because it seems that assets are either coming toward us or going away from us. When we think about money, we think about opportunities, we think about friends that come in and go out of our lives, and so on. It does seem that there is a constant flux to life and to the abundance or lack of abundance in life. Let's look at the next quotation. Robert Louis Stevenson, the Scottish novelist, he said this: The world is so full of a number of things. I'm sure we should all be as happy as kings." Well, Robert, just because the world is full of things doesn't necessarily mean we are full of things, and happiness doesn't come from things. He says the world is full of a number of things. I'm sure we should all be happy as kings. Well, no, we're not all happy as kings, because happiness does not come from things. If it did, all the rich people in the world would be the happiest people in the world, but they're not. So much for Robert Louis Stevenson. I'm sure he wrote some other good things, but in this case, not so much. Let's go to our next quotation. He says, "Develop an interest." Well, this is Henry Miller again. We agreed with him last time, so we'll find out if we agree with him this time. He says, develop an interest in life as you see it, in people, things, literature, music. The world is so rich, simply throbbing with rich treasures, beautiful souls, and interesting people. Forget yourself. I like that last part. Forget yourself and focus on what God is giving you in other people. He's right. The world is so rich, simply throbbing with rich treasures, beautiful souls, and interesting people. When we are so focused on ourselves and our own issues and our own problems and our own agendas and our own pride, we forget that, yes, God has given us some really interesting people that we can look at and learn from, and it'll be a great inspiration to us. Let's switch gears here and look at a couple of Proverbs from the Bible. On the topic of anger, the writer of Proverbs was Solomon, King Solomon of Israel. The Bible tells us the wisest man that ever lived. He says this. He says, a wise person is cautious and turns from evil, but a fool is easily angered and is careless. Caution and carelessness. Caution from the wise and carelessness from the fools. And of course, the bit about anger there, easily angered. Being easily angered and being careless go together so well, don't they? If we aren't careful, then we can be easily angered. And of course, being easily angered then rolls into a whole lot of other problems that we just don't want. Here's another one about anger. A gentle answer turns away anger, but harsh words stir up strife. So the question then becomes this: not only our anger, but how do we deal with someone else who is angry? The Bible talks about a gentle word turns away anger. I was watching a guy on YouTube the other day, and he said that when you're dealing with people that are unreasonable, you need to lower your voice. And I think what he said was talking in a nighttime FM radio voice. And what he meant by that was a very calm, soothing, quiet, deliberate voice. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. If we don't raise, if someone is up here with their anger and we choose not to raise our pitch to them, but instead lower our pitch and modulate our pitch so that we are speaking in a calm, reasonable, careful, precise way, it often, very often, helps diminish the emotionally charged environment of that situation. Let's look at one more proverb about anger here. It says, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but one slow to anger calms strife. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but one slow to anger calms strife. Here's the deal. We get to choose. We get to choose whether we are going to be hot-tempered and fly off the handle, or whether we're going to be the people that, remember Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And whether we are going to be peacemakers. Let's switch over and talk about a couple of positive, encouraging quotations here. So we talked about abundance, and as we're working through the alphabet here, we're going to talk about acceptance. Here we come to the prayer of Alcoholics Anonymous. Reinhold Niebuhr wrote this. He said, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other. I think the newer one says the wisdom to know the difference. But he was right in this. I'm not a super fan of everything that's taught by Alcoholics Anonymous, specifically the idea that you can choose what your higher power is, because my higher power could be a John Deere tractor instead of God, right? But he's right in the idea that we want God to give us the peace we need to accept the things that we cannot change, The Apostle Paul said, "In whatsoever state I am, uh, therewith be content." He says, I need to be content with whatever lot God has allowed for me, and the courage to change the things that I can. That's why I'm online today, talking to you, because I'm trying to build up this YouTube channel, and it's not easy, and especially when I'm here talking to everybody and just having the courage to get on and talk to everybody and post. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, to post these things and to talk about these things without a script, without having practiced everything, trying to be genuine and transparent and all that good stuff. It takes courage to change things, and that's not always easy, is it? Leave a comment about the things that you're trying to change. It's always useful for us to write it down and put it out there, because when we write it down and put it out there, then it suddenly somehow becomes real to us, right? Let's look at our next thought about acceptance here. This one's another anonymous quote. It says this: "Acceptance of others, their looks, their behaviors, their beliefs, brings you an inner peace and tranquility instead of anger and resentment." Now, there's a level at which I agree with this on. There's a level at which I don't agree. It depends on what you mean by acceptance, okay? If you mean by acceptance that you are willing to love and care about people regardless of their behaviors and beliefs, I completely agree. The Bible tells us even to love our enemies. But we have this idea in society today that acceptance means that we can't challenge anything. That acceptance of someone means that we can't talk with them about the direction that they may be headed in a wrong direction, or a dangerous direction, or a direction that will harm them or their family or whatever. We live in a day where acceptance is the goal rather than helping others is the goal. If acceptance means that I have to take in and approve of everything everybody else does or says, then that ends up being unloving. Because if I approve of every harmful, hurtful thing that everyone else does or says, then I am not being loving in that I should be helping them see the error of their way and helping them correct what is wrong in their thinking. And so I understand what the writer is saying here when he's talking about wanting us to accept others. I think we should accepting people in a way that loves them and wants the best for them and even challenges them when necessary. I think that's the biblical model. When we get to the idea of acceptance as endorsement, that becomes a problem. Or when acceptance becomes, you have to accept me and celebrate who I am and what I do and what I say, regardless of whether it's right or true or whatever else, that becomes a problem. So acceptance is great, but when acceptance passes the line and turns into a forced celebration of what we would believe to be something that is wrong or dangerous or harmful, then it's no longer acceptance. Then it's a forced thing that is a problem. Anyway, moving on to our next quotation on the topic of acceptance. James Russell Lowell, an American poet and essayist, said this: "There is no good in arguing with the inevitable. The only argument available with an east wind. Let me try that again. The only argument available with an east wind is to put on your overcoat. There are some things in life that are just going to come. They're just going to happen. And there's no sense fussing against them, no sense fighting against them, no sense putting on a big show and making a big flap about things. It's just going to happen. And the author here is right. He says the only argument with the east wind that is available to you is to put on your overcoat. And in our bubble-wrapped society, people forget that some things are just going to happen, and whining about it, fretting about it, does you no good. Put on your overcoat, brace yourself against the wind. Okay, now let's switch to a couple of verses about accomplishment, or verses, quotations. Edward Everett Hale, an American minister and writer, said, "If you have accomplished all that you have planned for yourself, you have not planned enough." And he's right. He's right. We need to shoot higher than what we can actually accomplish. Now, having said that, if we're going to do that, we also have to realize that we're not going to accomplish everything we want to. But if we don't, one man said this, if you shoot for the stars, you might hit the moon. But if you don't shoot for the stars, you'll never get to the moon. Here's a quotation from a French writer concerning accomplishment. Anatole France lived 1844 to 1924. He said this, or she said this, I don't know, male or female, I don't know the word Anatole, maybe somebody can leave that in the comments for me. To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream. Not only plan, but also believe. Dreaming, vision, and belief, having some trust and confidence that things will turn out well, two essential parts in accomplishing anything. If we can't envision a result, for example, if you've got a guy that wants to add more horsepower to his car, so he pulls the engine, puts in an engine with more horsepower. If he can't envision, first of all, how that's going to come about, where he's going to get the engine, how he's going to put that engine in that car, what he's going to do to increase the horsepower, all of those things. If you can't envision it, it's never going to happen. If he doesn't have confidence or belief in his abilities, it's never going to happen. So accomplishment does have a lot hinging on vision and belief, for sure. One more quotation here, and then we'll look at a couple more Proverbs. An anonymous quotation regarding accomplishment says this: "What 3 things do you want to accomplish this year? Write them down and place them on your refrigerator for an inspiration all year long." Well, I guess that's great unless your goal is not to look at the refrigerator all year. It's I don't know. I never have been big about posting goals and so on, and maybe I should be. I've just always found it a little tacky or just cheesy, I guess. But for some people, it makes a big difference being able to see those goals on the refrigerator or posted to their mirror wall in the bathroom every day. Here's another good one. German historian and poet by the name of Friedrich von Schiller. He said, "He that is overcautious will accomplish little." There's some truth to that. When we have to have it all figured out first, and we have to be super cautious first, it's just never going to happen. It's like this YouTube live that I'm doing now. I wanted to be cautious. I really did. I wanted to have all my ducks in a row and have all this figured out before I did this live, because I wanted to make sure that I would have the answers and such for folks. But I don't know. What's going on? Oh, okay. I'm hoping that this is working. We shall see. But let's go to another topic in the Book of Proverbs, the topic of calamity, when things go really bad, really fast. Let's look at it. One of the Proverbs says, he always plots evil with perversity in his heart. He stirs up trouble. Therefore, calamity will strike him suddenly. He will be shattered instantly beyond recovery. This is that idea of calamity coming very quickly to those that are causing trouble themselves, stirring up trouble themselves. If you're causing trouble, be ready for it to hit you with full force. I mean, you just can't get around it. If you're causing trouble, it's going to happen. Let's look at another one. The wise stir up knowledge, but the mouth of the fool hastens destruction. People that talk foolishly get themselves in trouble. It's just that simple, and bring trouble on themselves more quickly. I'm just wondering if I adjust these glasses some, whether I can get rid of some of the glare. Not really, yeah? Okay, that's all right. Oh, that might be making a difference. Just looks stupid. Oh well. I can see the words on this book, but they're very small. See? Yeah. So it's a whole lot easier for me to put on my glasses. Problem is, when I'm doing this, I'm putting them on and taking them off, putting them on and taking them off. It's a pain. Proverbs 12:21 says, "No disaster overcomes the righteous, but the wicked are full of misery." Now, you hear that verse and you say, "Well, wait a minute. I'm righteous. I'm trying to follow Jesus. I'm a believer, and I'm trying to do right and trying to follow God and trying to obey Him and all that. But bad things have happened to me." But notice it doesn't say bad things won't happen to you. It says, "No disaster overcomes the righteous." God, in His mercy, does one of two things for us. Either it gives us the ability to ride out the storm, or He gives us a way to escape the storm. But He promises us that the disaster won't completely overcome and overwhelm us to the point of utter disaster. Let's see here. I want to find something else. There we go. Let's talk about a couple of Proverbs talking about diligence. One says this: "Idle hands make one poor, but diligent hands bring riches." Now, we all work. Some of us work harder than others. And we do. The warning here isn't so much about being rich or poor. The warning here is about idle hands. It's about sitting around and doing nothing. And I think we're all guilty of that from time to time. But it tells us that idle hands make one poor. You and I don't think about it that way. We think about the idea that, well, idle hands are, I'm just not getting any better. I'm not making progress if I'm idle. But it seems the truth is, according to the writer of Proverbs, that being idle actually contributes to our poverty. It makes our poverty worse. And that's not easy. I got McDonald's. Turn this McCafe. They have all right coffee. Usually it's between them or Tim Hortons. I live in Canada, so we have Tim Hortons. But McDonald's coffee's all right. It's certainly better than, we have a chain up here called Robin's. I'm not terribly fond of Robin's coffee. It's just too watered down. Now, let's see here. Another proverb about diligence. It says, the son who gathers during summer is prudent. The son who sleeps during harvest is disgraceful. Now we're talking about families, right? And the idea of gathering in the summer and putting stuff away for the winter, and the idea of, if we are going to honor our parents, we are going to work alongside them in the harvest, and we are going to lay up food and provisions and money and so on for the hard times and the hard weather. And so we do need to get a hold of this. The Bible talks in another verse. It says, go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways and be wise. And it talks about her gathering up her food before the bad weather hits. Let's see here. Another proverb here. It says, the diligent hand will rule, but laziness will lead to forced labor. You say, well, we don't have slavery in North America, but we do. The servant is, the borrower is servant to the lender. And when we have to borrow money, then we are the servant of those institutions from which we have borrowed money. And as a result, we are the servant. We are the slave, if you will. Now, I understand that I'm using slave in a broader term than what most of us are used to using it. But still, if you are forced to work to pay interest on a loan that you have taken out, then you are working for someone else. And so let me just read that one more time so we can get that context again. The diligent hand will rule, but laziness will lead to forced labor. We are all the servants of someone. We're either the servants of God in heaven or the servants of our own appetites. And sometimes we just don't do well with that. All right, let's talk about achieving and accomplishing things. Here's a traditional quotation from Zimbabwe. It says this: if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. I like it. I really do. We diminish the capabilities that we have when we underestimate them. Now, that doesn't mean you can dance well, and it doesn't mean you can sing well. Those take practice, right? But when you and I work together with the capabilities God has given us, then we can achieve something. Whether that is initially something fantastic or it's just, yeah, who knows? But achieving requires trying. If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing. Here's another quotation from Robert F. Kennedy, the American senator and an attorney general. So going back a little ways here, 1925 to 1968. So that would be an earlier generation of Kennedys. He said this: only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. Again, he's right on this. If we aim at little things, we'll hit little things. If we aim at big things, we have a chance of hitting bigger things. And the problem is we have to risk failing greatly. We have to risk falling on our faces over and over and over. The point I want to make is this: falling on your face and your failures are the steps to success. Okay? Your failures are the steps to your success. And if you and I aren't willing to fail, then we're not going to be able to succeed. Right now, I'm 30 minutes into this live stream and haven't really seen very many people show up. And I'm not complaining about that. It's something I'm trying. And apparently it's something I'm failing at right now. But that's all right. I didn't do all of the back end stuff that I needed to in order to show people that this was happening. Let's look at another one. A French moralist and writer by the name of Luc de Clapier. I don't know. Somebody write it in the comments and tell me how I'm supposed to pronounce that. He was a marquis of someplace, again, because I can't pronounce it. He said, "To achieve great things, we must live as though we are never going to die." I got to think about that one for a minute. To achieve great things, we must live as though we are never going to die. It's different. I mean, usually the way I've heard this said is not living as though we're never going to die. I've heard more the idea we need to live as though there is no tomorrow. We'll live as though we're going to die tomorrow if we're going to achieve great things. I'm just not sure he's right on this. Let me read it again. He says, "To achieve great things, we must live as though we were never going to die." If we were going to live as though we're never going to die and we had all the time in the world, I don't think we'd ever get anything accomplished. I don't think we'd ever do anything. And that's the struggle here. So I think Luc de Clapier, or whatever his name is here, I think he's wrong. That's one of the first that I've vehemently disagreed with. Here's an anonymous quotation: "Achieving starts with believing." Let's again think about this for a minute. Achieving starts with believing. Believing what, though? Believing that it's possible? I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure if it's believing that it's possible. I think more the idea might be believing that it's worthwhile trying, and believing that you can make an effort at it. There are a lot of things that we want to achieve that we don't necessarily believe that we're going to be able to do in our lifetime. World peace. You know, we all ought to be working toward peace in our families, in our community, in our region, ultimately in our country, in our world. Do we really think we're going to accomplish that in our lifetime? No, probably not. Do we think it's a worthwhile goal? Yes. Do we believe that we may be able to be a help in that somehow? Yes. And so achieving does start with believing, but the question is believing what? And I don't necessarily think it's the belief that, yes, this can happen and I can do it. I think more the idea is believing that it's a worthwhile cause, and that that's worthy of our time and effort. Turning the page, talking about action. There's an old proverb that says, "Doing is better than saying." Yes, unless you're a public speaker, then saying is doing. But there are a lot of people that like to talk a lot about what they are going to do, and they never actually get around to doing it. Sometimes I guess I can be like that. I've got a lot of great ideas. I just don't get around to half of them. But doing is better than saying, for sure, for sure. Unless you're doing something that is wrong, doing is better than just talking about it. Well, we saw a quotation a minute ago from Robert F. Kennedy. Now let's look at John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, of course, that was shot. He said this: "There are risks and costs to a program of action, but they are far less than the long-range risks and costs of comfortable inaction." Let me say that again. There are risks and costs to a program of action, but they are far less than the long-range risks and costs of comfortable inaction. John Kennedy's right. If you get a chance, read his book, Profiles in Courage. Well worth the read. But notice here, one of the things he talks about is a program of action. He says there are risks and costs to a program of action. In other words, if you're going to lay out a strategy and lay out a plan, and you're going to tackle that plan step by step, there are risks to you and there are costs to you. And you have to be willing to accept those risks and pay those costs in order to try to get to your goal, to get to your objective. But he says that those risks and costs are far less than the long-range risk and cost of comfortable inaction. We are going to risk something. It is going to cost us something. If we take action, those risks and costs may result in benefit to us. If we do nothing, there are still risks and costs, but there is no end game. There's no benefit. There's no advantage at the end. And so we have to understand that every course of action and or inaction results in it costing us something and results in a risk that we are taking. General George Patton, an American Army general, he said this: "A good plan violently executed right now is far better than a perfect plan executed next week." I love it. I need to post that somewhere. A good plan violently executed right now is far better than a perfect plan executed next week. I tend to fall into this problem, right? This problem of wanting to have a good plan or a perfect plan before I even start, a plan that has guaranteed me success. And it's just, it doesn't work. You have to go out on a limb sometimes and hope that limb's going to hold you. That's part and parcel of kind of what I'm doing with this YouTube channel. Going out on a limb, trying to figure out what works, what's going to work, whether people will actually listen to what I have to say and find it useful and valuable. And there is risk to that. And Lord willing, there will be some reward to that as well. But I like General Patton here. Let me read it one more time for you. A good plan violently executed right now is far better than a perfect plan executed next week. I'm gonna write that down, post it in my office here somewhere. Charles de Gaulle, a French statesman. Charles de Gaulle, of course, they named the airport in Paris after him. He said this: "Deliberation is the work of many men. Action of one alone," or action is the work of one man alone. An interesting thought, because the action of one man then results in the actions of others, right? The action of one can inspire the actions of others. But many people are very good at deliberating, trying to think everything through and muddle everything through and just put everything off because you got to try to figure out every detail. So Charles de Gaulle was a man of action as well, apparently. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Do the thing and you will have the power." Ralph Waldo Emerson was an American essayist, poet, and philosopher. Do the thing and you will have the power. Now, I'm not sure what thing he's talking about, and I'm not sure what power he's trying to get here. But there is certainly a certain power in tackling something, in starting something, and trying something, and actually putting yourself forward and trying to get something done, and trying to do something you've never done before. And maybe that's what he's talking about when he says, "Do the thing and you'll have the power." I don't know. William Shakespeare, you knew we'd get to old Shakespeare at some point here. He says, "Suit the action to the word and the word to the action, with this special observance that you overstep not the modesty of nature." Okay, as a lot of things with Shakespeare, we're not all entirely sure what he's trying to say here. Suit the action to the word and the word to the action. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let our words and our actions line up together. And then he says, with this special observance, in other words, pay attention to this point, that you overstep not the modesty of nature. I think what he's talking about here is your talk and your action need to parallel one another, but you need not to be prideful in either. That seems to be what he's talking about when he's talking about the modesty of nature. The idea of yes, be active. Yes, take action. Yes, have your words line up with the action you want to take, but don't be prideful in it. And I think he's right in this. He could have said it a little more simply, but that's Shakespeare for you. Here's an anonymous quotation, then we'll look at a couple more Proverbs. He says, "Keep in mind that even if you're on the right track, you can still be left behind if you just sit there." I like it. Yeah, it makes sense. You can be on the right road, but if you're just sitting there on the middle line, you're not going to go anywhere, and you're likely going to be hit by traffic. Let's see here. Grab my Book of Proverbs. Topic of discernment. It's an important topic. One of these Proverbs says, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom and listen closely to my understanding, so that you may maintain discretion and your lips safeguard knowledge." Now, we have to ask ourselves then, what is discretion? Discretion is being able to make fine-tuned choices between what is good, better, best, or what is bad, worse, evil, and wicked. Okay. My school teacher used to say, "Good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best." We often sacrifice the best for us. We sacrifice it in favor of what we see is good enough. And discretion is knowing the difference. Knowing the difference between knowing when we're passing up the good enough and knowing when we're passing on the best and settling for the good enough. Discretion is also being able to walk into a room and understand what's going on in that room, and understanding who the players are and who is trying to do evil at that point, who is trying to do good at that point. Discretion is making wise choices, all of that. Let's look at another proverb here. "The mind of the discerning acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks it." You cannot be discerning without knowledge. That means you can't be discerning without being a learner, a continual learner, being a reader, watching informative and helpful YouTube videos, listening to podcasts of people smarter than you are. This is a problem in our society today and a problem online today. Everybody wants to listen to people that are on their plane, on their same level. And most folks aren't trying to level up. They're trying to be entertained. And when you're not trying to level up, you're listening to people that are either on your level or 2 steps below your level. But you need to listen to someone, and I need to listen to people that make us think, that make us evaluate, that make us roll things around in our minds and expand our world, as it were, giving us more facts, giving us more insight, and so that we accumulate more knowledge. Knowledge is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise instruction. Fools hate instruction. And we need to make sure that our wisdom, wisdom is the proper application of knowledge, okay? So if we don't have that bucket full of knowledge, then we will not be able to take that knowledge and hook it to the engine of wisdom so that we can actually make good choices and make good evaluations of circumstances and evaluations of people's actions and so on. So discernment is a big deal. Let's look at another one. A king sitting on a throne to judge separates out all evil with his eyes. We need to be like the king, right? The king sitting on the throne of judgment has to be able to make quick, wise decisions, sometimes having all the facts, sometimes not having all the facts, but still being able to see through to the truth of the matter. Let's look at the topic of discipline for a minute, and then we'll go back to some quotations from some other people. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Okay, so we just talked about knowledge, so let's just line this up, okay? So the Bible is showing us here that the fear of God starts it all. What is the fear of God? God is big, I am small. Because of that, I obey him. Okay, that's simply the fear of God. It's not sitting in a corner afraid that God's going to strike us with lightning or something. But instead, it's saying, God is great, I am small. He is Almighty God, I'm just me. I'm gonna obey him. So the fear of God allows us to collect the knowledge that we need. The knowledge that we need allows us then to be wise. Okay? So wisdom that is not rooted back into the fear of God is what the Bible talks about later on, worldly wisdom or the wisdom of man. And that, of course, is on shaky ground because it does not acknowledge the authority of God. And if God isn't our authority, then we are our own authority. That gets us into big trouble real quick because none of us are as smart as what we think we are. And none of us are as, what do I call it? Not only smart, but none of us are as infallible as we think we are. This is one of the challenges I have with doing these YouTube videos, especially when we get into talking about news and so on, because it's easy to jump to conclusions when it comes to looking at the news of the day. And I want to be careful. That's the thing. With a YouTube channel, you want to try to keep on top of things and be able to comment on the latest things. But it always seems, especially with the news media these days, that the real story comes out 6 months later. You know what I mean? And then you and I look like a fool because we commented on it when we didn't have all the information because all the information wasn't made readily available to us. Sometimes we just have to work off of the information that we have and try to do our best, and that's most of life. We kind of find our way and figure things out as we go. But the point is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. Discipline is important. God disciplines his children to make us more like Jesus and to bring us back into the path many times. But there's also that idea of us disciplining ourselves, right? The idea that we have to engage in some measure of self-discipline and bringing our own heart under control, because otherwise we're going to be like a mad team of racehorses running away on us, and so we need to be careful not to be. Let's look at one more proverb here on the topic of faithfulness. It says, "He is a shield for those who live with integrity, so that he may guard the paths of justice and protect the way of his faithful followers." And of course, this is talking about God, and talking about God being a protector for believers. And here it calls his followers the faithful followers. There's a whole lot of things we can't do. You and I are not held accountable for what we can't do, our inabilities. There are 100,000 things in this world I don't have the ability or talent to do. But we are held accountable for what God has given us, the abilities God has given it to us, and how faithful we are to obeying him and following in those abilities. All right, so an anonymous man concerning the topic of action said this: "After all is said and done, more is said than done." Of course, the topic is action, right? After all is said and done, more is said than done. And there's no doubt about it. Just no doubt about it. We really need to make sure that we're not just yammering along with our mouths, but that we're actually, if we are talking, that we're trying to accomplish something with our talking, and not just talking about all the great plans we have and never actually doing anything. Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, concerning the topic of action, said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." That's just plain good old common sense, good old fashioned advice. Do what you can with what you have where you are. You can't use another man's toolbox or another man's abilities. You only have what you've got to work with. Now you say, "Well, I don't have very much to work with." You probably have more than what you think you do. You really do. The other thing is, we always say to ourselves, if I was in New York City, my business would be better. Or if I was in Los Angeles, my acting career would be better. Or if I was doing this, if I was in this place, or if I was in that place, or not even just physical location, but emotional location. If my emotions were at this spot, then I would be able to accomplish this. Or if I was, Theodore Roosevelt's right here: do what you can with what you have where you are. Because here's the trick to it: when you do what you can with what you have, you will get more. When you do what you can where you are, you will end up going to where you need to be. It's just how life goes. When we invest what we have, we see a return on that. And so do what you can with what you have where you are. I'm going to try to get to an hour here. So let's look at a couple more quotations. That same French fellow that I was trying to pronounce his name a few minutes ago, Luc de Clapier. I'm hoping that's right. We'll see. He said this: action makes more fortunes than caution. Action makes more fortunes than caution. That makes good sense, right? Let's go to our next quotation here. Footprints in the sand, or footprints in the sands of time, rather, are not made by sitting down. Footprints in the sands of time are not made by sitting down. That's good. That's almost back to that other quotation we looked at about if you're on the right road but you're sitting down, you're not going to go anywhere. And that's kind of the same thought here. Footprints in the sands of time are not made by sitting down. You and I are not going to accomplish anything of certainly eternal value, and certainly nothing of that will last a couple years down the road or after we are gone, if we do not take action of some sort. So let me try to wrap up these last few minutes by encouraging you a little bit, if I can. We talked a lot about action tonight and taking action. Let me encourage you to write down, first of all, what you want to accomplish, and then the 2 or 3 micro steps that get you closer to what you want to accomplish. Too often we talk about action, but we think of action in great big steps. And really, that's not feasible for us. You and I don't think in great big steps, and we certainly don't act in great big steps. We need to figure out, okay, if I'm going to run a 100-mile race, now who runs a 100-mile race? I don't know. Nobody, I guess. But if we're going to run a 100-mile race, what are the things that I have to do in order, first of all, to get ready to do that? I'm not even running yet. But I've got to get a water bottle. I've got to get running shoes. I've got to start training every day. I've got to increase that training little by little. I might need to find a coach to train me. All of those micro steps are all victories, are all things that we can slowly by slowly get us to the place where we're at the starting line and we're ready to run. And then it's just mile after mile after that, and one foot in front of the other. You and I get too afraid of the big race, and fear really is one of the big problems that we face. But when we can break it down into doable steps, we can break it down into things that we can actually accomplish little by little. That's really the great thing of it. Now, let me finish, I suppose, our live stream here with this thought. Action is great. It's important. But make sure, first of all, that God wants you to take that action. And second, make sure that God wants you to take that action now. There are some times that we think things are a great idea and a great plan, but God says it's not for you just yet. It's not your time yet. And so we need to be people of action. There's no doubt. But we need to be people of action in God's way and in God's time. Well, I think I'm going to call it a night. God bless y'all. Have a happy day.